Okay. So, so yes, this is a different kind of picture of me. I've been involved in technical documentation for about 32 years. I worked at many companies in the U.S. for 26 years. I hired dozens of tech writers, managed teams, created teams of tech writers, and then in 2011 I started Safe Solutions here in the Philippines. And we have several large companies that are happy to employ us in Japan and in the United States. So I know we don't have that many people on the phone here today, so I'd like to make this interactive. And so I'd like it to hear from everybody. If you could say, you know, what your name is, where you're located, you know, what your connection with tech writing is, and then a little bit about your experience with outsourcing. And you can use some of the questions on this screen. So who would like to go first?
Everyone should be able to speak. I didn't mute anyone, so you'll just either have to enable your microphone or just start talking if you're on the phone. Unmute your phone and just start talking.
Okay. So how about Anna? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is Phoebe Forio, and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And I worked, the company I worked for, we had an OEM with Nortel, who's no longer in business, but they were acquired by Avaya a while back. Anyway, they outsourced to a group, I believe they were in India, and so I worked with them because I provided source content for our product, and then they branded it for Nortel. So that's my only experience, except for the fact that we do have some writers currently who are in the Ukraine that are, I don't manage those writers, but they are contractors or part of a group, but they're out of the Ukraine. So that's about it.
I see. Well, thanks, Phoebe. And so your experience of outsourcing with tech writing, has it been positive, negative, mixed?
So far, the groups I've worked with have been very, very good. We didn't have, they followed directions very well, and the content that they produced and the deliverables were great. So it has been positive.
That's great. Okay. Okay. How about Miranda?
It looks like Yvette is calling in. So Miranda doesn't look like she has anything enabled in terms of her speakers or anything. So I'll go next since somebody else is jumping.
How about?
Okay. Ryan Armstrong. I'm also from Atlanta. I'm Director of Communications and Product Evangelism for RouteMatch Software. I've been in technical documentation for a little over 20 years. Have not done any tech writing or TechCom outsourcing, but I do have a lot of experience with development outsourcing, not at RouteMatch, but at other countries. Other companies.
Right. Good. Okay. Very good. Let's see. How about Anna? Can Anna speak?
Good evening, everybody. Yes. My name is Ana Maria Marion, and I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been writing content for probably over 10, 12 years now, and I have done it for corporate America as an employee, and now I do it as an independent contractor. It is not my main source of income. I provide training for the plastics and simulation software industry. But this is something that I have been doing, and I do that in English and Spanish, especially because a lot of companies are developing the South American market, and that is the Spanish that I grew up with.
Yes, so you're very involved in plastics, which I don't know if you remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes,
Well, it's
I
a
do.
U.S. cultural reference. Yes, plastics. Plastic, yes.
It's a
They're very
classic.
excited about plastic. Okay, thank you, Anna. Anyone else that wants to speak and can speak at this point? Okay, maybe we'll move on and others can jump in later. So I'll answer for myself. So I worked in the U.S. for 26 years and worked the last 6 months about of my time in the U.S. I was at a large company there and working with, we just added 2 writers in India to our team in San Francisco. And I actually had a very positive experience working with those 2 writers because I found that when I would explain something clearly to them, you know, they would understand it and would not make the same mistake again. However, it was interesting that I was on a team of, I think, 4 or 5 writers in San Francisco, and the other writers did not have a positive experience working with the same 2 Indian writers that I was also working with. And, you know, it really made me think about the attitudes we bring to working across cultures and across geographies and how that impacts our experience. Because, you know, I had a very positive experience, and as far as I can tell, the other writers had a negative experience really because of their expectations and their, you know, maybe they just didn't understand how to approach the situation effectively. And if I had more time there before I left, maybe we would have made more progress. So I think we've talked about this. You know, the last time I gave this talk was at LAPACON in New Orleans, and we had about 20 people, 15 people maybe. And at the start of the talk, there was no one who was positive about outsourcing. A little different experience in this group. So what I want to do briefly is talk about the stages of technical writing and compare that, you know, and how that fits in with the history of outsourcing. Now, this information about the stages of technical writing is based on my experience in the U.S. And I'm very interested in feedback from others on this because it's really, as I said, just based on my experience and research. And we have a infographic here, and actually what I'm going to try to do, because I think it's kind of small here, and maybe what I will do is share it as, there we go, as a picture. So you can see the idea is that in the 1970s, again, this is based on the U.S., technical writing was in its infancy. Very few technical writers. I'm not sure if there were any academic programs. Few managers that had any experience in technical writing. An infant is unable to effectively use language to communicate. So that is, you know, how I depict the role of a technical writer. Of course, the job of technical writers is to communicate, but in terms of within an organization, it was very difficult for technical writers to have their needs understood, to have the organization understand what they can contribute and how to best support them and take advantage of their talents. And then in the 1980s, it started to get a little more involved. This is when I started as a tech writer. There were few tech writing managers. I think there was some academic programs that I wasn't aware of them myself at the time. There were mostly sole tech writers, a few teams. So as a youth, you can use language to communicate effectively, yet you're often not respected for your views or input. And I think that was the experience of many tech writers in the 80s. And then in the 90s, adolescence, there's more tech writers, some actual teams, some tech writing managers, so, and some academic programs going. So I recall as a manager in the 90s, I started seeing some resumes of people who graduated from a technical writing program, say, at Carnegie Mellon. There were only 1 or 2 at that time. So adolescents rebel, often struggle against the dominant culture. So that was a time of tech writers and tech writing managers starting to get some power organizationally and starting to fight for, you know, what we needed in order to make the documentation documentation effective. So I recall in the 90s, for example, there were some central groups in large companies that supported tech writers, but those groups had to continually fight for funding and keep justifying their existence. And then the 2000 young adulthood, you had tech writers, managers, even directors, you had central support groups, you had the beginning of the unified content strategy, topic-based authoring revolution. You had information designers, information architects, documentation tools developers. So a lot of technological and methodological maturity going on, maturation in tech writing, and the rise of globalization and localization. So young adults discover the world, begin to conquer it. And then stage 5, I call adulthood in the 2010s in the U.S. Now, when it says unified content strategy revolution in full swing, that still is impacting some of the largest companies only, and some smaller ones too, but it's by no means comprehensive in its reach. You do have content strategists, and a lot of them, technical writing outsourcing begins to grow. And technical writers, are starting to command more respect and understand how to influence organizations, how to influence the customer experience, actually, through our participation. And then the late 2010s, I call midlife. Technical writing is starting to transition from engineering to marketing as organizations start to realize that all content is marketing because people often make purchase decisions based in part on post-purchase content. The pressures to outsource and offshore increase. All companies have to reduce costs. Competition increase. Social media is now a big factor. And automation is becoming a big part of it. So I'm interested if anyone wants to jump in and let me go back to the presentation and comment on that because it's really, as I said, based on my experience. Does anybody want to offer their own experience in terms of how this has happened? I know some of you have been involved for quite a while. Okay. Can folks hear me now? I see someone said that they can't hear me. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Okay, good. You can hear me. Okay, so let's move on. So now we're going to look at the growth of outsourcing. So now, of course, technical writing and outsourcing have a much longer history that I'm not going into, going back hundreds of years, arguably. But to look at more recently, outsourcing, has been growing a great deal in the last 40, 50 years. And you have some facts there that just give you a little bit of sense of that. And there's a lot of reasons why outsourcing is growing. So this, I think it's very important to understand that there are very powerful economic and historical forces that are pushing the growth of outsourcing. And it's not something we can vote on now. We can impact how it's done and a lot about it, but it's like trying to stop rain. It wouldn't be productive, really. So there's a lot of, it is cost reduction, but it's a lot more than that. I mean, for instance, companies that used to have their entire market was in the U.S., now more than half of their customers are overseas, and so they want to have their developers, their tech writers, the people developing their content, the people developing their marketing to be of the cultures that they're selling to. And that's just one of several important factors. So does anyone want to speak on this? I'm going to give you some examples of the downsides, but does anyone want to jump in and talk about the problems they've seen in tech writing outsourcing or the fears that you have about it? So you can either speak up or if you type something in the chat, I'll mention it.
I apologize for any background noise. My kids are hovering around the kitchen waiting on dinner. But personally, my biggest struggle, I guess, is learning what you're supposed to do to get things outsourced, what types of projects are best suited for outsourcing, and then what areas that you should target depending on what you're trying to outsource.
Yeah, those are great questions. You know, and part of the first thing I'd say in terms of where you should start is it's good to start with a small pilot project, and you know, so you can learn, and so you don't want to put your most difficult and biggest risk project as the first one in the pipeline. And a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll start by outsourcing some lower level tasks. I mean, for example, if you have a team of fairly experienced senior technical writers, excuse me, and a lot of their time is spent doing things that a less experienced person could do, you can outsource some of those things like managing spreadsheets that track the documentation, or doing file conversions, doing, you know, if you're involved in a transition from legacy content to topic-based content, the conversion and transition work, doing preparation for translation, or other work involved with translation and supporting it. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff, and in many companies, and so they'll start. In fact, we have a very large customer who started with us last April. They gave us a 1-month project for one writer, and it really wasn't a technical writing project per se. I mean, it was, but there was no writing involved. They use a CMS, not a very popular CMS, so it's nothing they expected us to have experience in. And they had a bunch of documentation that they needed rebranded. So it meant going into the CMS and going into all the files and changing changing the product names without using a script, and changing all the graphics, or almost all the graphics, where there was any branding. And so a lot of that work, you know, it actually was dealing with the content management system, because, you know, everything you do, it kind of multiplies the time it takes for tasks like that. And then we completed that project for them, and it was interesting how that went, because, you know, that company is still a customer of ours, and I consider them a very good customer. And one of the reasons is they gave us very specific instructions for how to do that project, and we completed the first phase in 3 weeks. And then they said, oh, by the way, sorry, we gave you the wrong instruction, and we need you to redo it. And the reason I consider them at the time a very good customer, and still, is that they didn't blame us for that, right? They made it clear they were very happy with our work because we followed their instructions exactly. So we did redo it, and that project ended, and then 2 months later, they came back and started with us a project involving 6 technical writers, and a graphic designer, and editor. So I mentioned, I found a way to summarize the very complex economic and historical arguments or explanations of why outsourcing is growing, and it's basically about productivity. I mean, if you look back, you know, when trains came into use, productivity increased dramatically, and the whole world changed when the assembly line came into use. So technology changes, productivity grows, and the reason the world changes around this technology is because of the opportunity for increased productivity. So that's kind of the large historical path that we're all a part of. So this is a look at the positive side, what happens when technical writing outsourcing works well. And I've had a lot of experience with this in the last couple of years. Effective global collaboration, everyone learning from each other, process improvement, which, you know, when an organization takes the challenge of outsourcing seriously, they tend to look at their processes and break them down and think about, okay, how can we improve the processes, and how are they going to change when we outsource? Improved quality, you know, can result a lot from that process I just described. Reduced costs, increased global responsiveness, and productivity improvements. Some of the pitfalls, yes, bad things can happen. And I've seen, in a lot of the situations I've been involved with, particularly on, I've been on both sides of outsourcing as a provider and as a consumer or participant at the company, and often when I was in the U.S., decisions that do not involve technical communicators often don't go well. So my big point to people in technical communication is that a stance of trying to resist or prevent outsourcing is not going to get you anywhere. It's far better to, as you folks are doing, to learn about outsourcing and try to be involved even before it's something the company thinks about, because at some point they probably will think about it. And you want to be involved in how those decisions are made. Because in general in life, what you resist persists. So yes, there is job loss involved in outsourcing. And when I was in the U.S. as a tech writer and manager, I saw this happen, layoffs that happen as a result of outsourcing. In the 4 years that we've been working with clients, mainly in Japan and the U.S., we've never been involved in a situation that where writers, in-house writers, were laid off before, during, or after our engagement, or as a result of our engagement. I've been in a lot of online conversations about this, and I published an article about it, and 2 or 3 people responded like, "How can you say layoffs don't happen?" I was in this situation, and I never said that. What I said is that all of our client experiences so far at their solutions for the last 4 years, that has not been a factor. There's a lot of other scenarios and situations. But yes, layoffs do happen. So let's look at the success factors, and this may answer some of your questions, Ryan, and some other people's questions. So, and this was my view. So if we go back, 10, 15 years, I really thought that it's something that we should oppose, and that's how to keep our job. But my experiences in 2 continents now show me that it actually can work very well, particularly when you have technical communicators involved in management, which you do have now quite often. It was rare 20, 30 years ago. And the crucial question is, how are technical writing outsourcing decisions made and how it is done? There's one large company that I came to know how they did this, and they have 2 different divisions. And the consumer division of this very large company, at one point, the executive decided abruptly to outsource all of the technical writing for the consumer products to one of the large system integrator companies in India. Whereas the enterprise division of the company took a different approach, where each of the product teams within the enterprise group added folks in India and China, including some tech writers in India, and gradually they did gradually reduce staff in the U.S. and increase them in India and China, but they had, for many years, writers, and I think still writers in the U.S. working with those in India. And so on the enterprise side, that scenario stuck, and they managed to, keep improving over many years. But on the consumer side, 2 years after the executives made that decision, which they had not involved any technical communicators in, they were unhappy with the results and were looking to figure out how to bring it back to the U.S. So to me, it was a very clear example of how to go about it and how not to go about it. So there's a variety of scenarios where outsourcing can work. So if you do have a writing team, and our customers really fall into these 2 categories. Some of them already have teams of writers, and we are expanding their capacity at lower cost. So maybe you've got 5 writers, but you have work for 7 writers, and the work keeps growing, but you don't have the budget to add more writers. Well, by expanding, you can, by outsourcing, you can expand your capacity at a lower cost, and you can relieve the pressure on the existing team. You can also have them doing the higher level tasks that they're more interested in. and their morale can improve. And I've seen that happen. The thing is that there's no simple rules. Every situation is different, and there are low-quality outsourcing companies. There are low-quality writers in every country, and there are great writers in quite a variety of countries now. In fact, I found quite a number of technical writers in the Philippines with more than 10 years experience in topic-based authoring and content management systems. So process maturity and content strategy are very important factors when you start looking at outsourcing. So if you have an immature process, meaning that there's not good communication between your developers and your tech writers as it currently exists, and tech writers have to struggle to find out when the UI changes, you need to fix those problems before you start outsourcing, because outsourcing can magnify problems like that. So, I don't say that everyone should be outsourcing or that every situation is ready for outsourcing or that it's appropriate in every situation. But what I have found is that it's very hard to come up with hard and fast rules. Like some people say, oh, you can't outsource manufacturing documentation. Well, we're actually doing that. So it really depends a lot on the situation. The kind of risks you face, I've got these in 8 different categories. So there are risks, and this is not just from outsourcing, but with a lot of global companies, when you've got people in different locations, regardless of organization, even if they're within your organization, there are time zone difficulties, there are issues working together. It's a lot of the things that happen automatically when you're in the same room, same office, don't happen, and you need to think about that and manage for that. There are differences in functions. So, for example, some of our customers are new to technical writing, and so they don't have any tech writers, and they've never worked with them, and so their engineers don't know what to expect of tech writers and how to work with them. So people of different functions, even of the same culture, can have difficulty working with each other if they don't understand each other's roles and skills and talents. Inclusion. So this is a very common pitfall where a company has technical writers, say, in the U.S., and those technical writers are fully included in the project. They're a part of the wiki. They're a part of all the meetings, the email list, the bug tracking system, etc. So they have access to all the information they need. And then they add technical writers either in-house or outsourced in another country, but they don't provide any of that kind of access and inclusion to those technical writers. And then months later, they're wondering why the technical writers aren't doing well. Well, it's pretty simple. You have to include them the same way you include people in your own geography. And then language issues can cause problems. And, offshore technical writing companies unfortunately have a reputation for very low English quality. And that's something we struggle against all the time, because we have, we deliver the same level of quality we get with the writers in the U.S. And I've had customers who I explained this to during the sales process, once they start working with us, they express total shock at the level of the quality of the content you're giving them, because despite everything I told them, they expected very low quality. So you have to, one of the key issues with language is editing, right? Technical writers, particularly if they don't have 10 years experience, they need to be edited. And often companies will provide editing for their writers in the U.S., and then they outsource, and they have no plan for editing, and they say, oh, well, we did, but it's not in the budget. And then again, they're surprised why the quality of the English is poor. I mentioned experience level, so that's another thing. If your tech writers overseas are new to tech writing and maybe 1 year experience, and your ones in the U.S. have 10 years, well, a lot of what the problems that develop may just be due to the difference in years of experience, and not due to the fact that they're in a different culture or geography. Culture can have huge impacts. And you do need to have an understanding of how people communicate and work differently in the different cultures involved. And what I've found is it's important to have some level of mix of cultures in each geography. So one of the things that makes our engagements with our clients work is that here in the Philippines, we don't just have Filipinos working, we also have me, and I'm an American. So I understand the culture of our American clients and can provide a go-between and sort of a cultural translation when needed. Competency, as I mentioned, quality levels vary all over. And it's also competency of management that is very important. And that's the lesson on management. So those are some of the key things to look out for. The bottom line is that many of the same factors that lead to success or failure when you're in one location are just magnified when you multiply locations. So this is some of the things we can learn about that. I think this is changing, but a few years ago, the whole focus of tech writers about outsourcing was really fear and insecurity. And, I think the antidote to that is to focus on improving quality. Whether it's an outsourcing situation or not, how can we contribute to improving quality? For management, you really need to think about process improvement and your content strategy. You need to think about your team. So that what I shared a while ago in answer to Ryan's question about the team I was on in the U.S., the management really hadn't thought about, okay, how do we prepare our existing team to work with these folks in another culture and to deal with this new environment where we're basically telling them, your job's at risk because we're hiring these people over here, and there was very little thought about how to deal with that, and so there was a lot of resistance. And this is some of what we talked about. It says ensure realistic financial analysis. So one of the things about that is, some people think, oh, when you're outsourced, you can save like 80% because the pay scales in another country are so much lower. Well, no, that's actually not true. When you look at all the different costs involved, because often, there's travel involved to make the whole situation work better. There's all kinds of, there's more training, there's more management. And I don't think I have this slide, but I used to have a slide about the Vincent studies that you can save something like 15 to 25% over time. The idea that you're going to save 80% is a fantasy. So if the only reason that you're doing outsourcing is to save cost, it might not be the best approach. And then also to focus on career development, right? So there can be opportunities for advancement that result from outsourcing for the people on your existing team, and that can be a focus that can help improve morale. You want to look at where you're outsourcing to. There's different problems in different countries. There's different levels of infrastructure problems, different levels of English. Philippines, actually, this global English company has done research and testing of countries around the world, and they actually rate the Philippines the highest in the world in business English, even higher than UK and US. And I think part of the reason for that is a large part of your workforce now in the UK and the US are expats, or people from other cultures, whereas in the Philippines, we do have exports in the workforce, but they tend to come from English-speaking countries, and the language of business here is English. And I mentioned this before, start with a low-risk pilot project. You have to plan for things like language, time zone, all these different issues we've been talking about. You have to include people. It really helps to have your QA team test the documentation. We're getting toward the end of the time. So this is the basic conclusion. What I've found is it really depends on how well you plan and execute outsourcing. It can really make things worse, or it can really improve things for everyone. So at this point, does anyone want to chime in with questions, comments? Do you feel similarly? Do you have more concerns now than you did when we started? Let me see who's typing something. Okay.
Is there any, this is Phoebe again, is there anything that you should specifically ask or look for in a outsourcing group? I mean, other than, I mean, it's the mix.
Great question, Phoebe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one thing to consider is the company that you're considering focused on writing? Now, of course, you know, I'm completely biased about this, but in my experience, many of the outsourcing companies that are, you know, that do all kinds of work, they do development, they do QA, they do some writing, they don't necessarily know how to hire and manage technical writers. So I think it helps to, you know, to go with a company that is focused on writing. But again, that's, whether you agree or not, that's one issue to look at. And, you know, you can ask for references. You know, we just found a new customer, and that's something they did as part of their process. And I was able to connect them with two of our customers that were happy to give us a reference. You know, you can talk, you can look into how is the company managed, how do they deal with editing, right? So at Safe Solutions, we hire technical writers who don't have a lot of experience, but then we also hire editors who have at least 10 years experience in technical writing, and we arrange it so that the clients don't see the content until it goes to one of our editors, and sometimes two of them. So, you know, you can just have a conversation with the provider about their process. And I think those kinds of details about, you know, that kind of conversation will give you more than just asking, oh, do you have experience with this tool or that tool? So does that make sense, Phoebe? Is that helpful?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the people who try to do it all, you know, the developers and documentation and everything else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and to be fair, my experience with that may be out of date, because that's like, you know, 8 years ago, I was aware of situations where companies hired these large Indian outsourcers and had problems. But who knows? Since then, those companies may have learned a lot more about tech writing. I really don't know. You know, see, our main competition is the in-house efforts of companies. So, you know, companies that have developers in India also hire writers in India as their own employees. You know, so that's something else to consider. Of course, those companies have to invest a tremendous amount in creating a subsidiary in the other country, dealing with all the local laws and regulations, and hiring people there, and, you know, providing infrastructure, et cetera. So we do that for our customers. We provide them a presence and build it. So this is just something I'm inviting you to. I'm available to speak with any of you, and you know, I'll provide you a free consultation. You can just contact me. And even if you're not in a decision-making role, or you're nowhere close to deciding to go with outsourcing, I'm happy to talk to you. So here's some questions to think about. And if you want, you can type your answers to this. And at the end, I'm going to show you the answers of the people that we got live from folks in New Orleans in October. So by 2030, in a typical company, what % of tech writing do you think will take place outside of those potential groups? 25, 50, 75, 90, 95%. In 2030, how will the number of technical communicators in the U.S. compare to that to 2015? So twice as many, more, the same, or less? So you can think about that. And this is my contact info, and of course you'll have the slides and the recording available. This is just a bonus slide. I'm going to be doing a webinar in April, and actually, I have a different version of this PowerPoint that's got the link to it. It's here, no, it's here. Okay. And let's see if we do slideshow, thumbprint slide. There you go. So I think you can see the link there. But I'm actually in the process of writing a book about management, and particularly managing technical writers, and I've come up with several acronyms. You see two of them here. The key things about management are caring, access, respect, vision, and expect excellence. You know, the fundamental being of a manager is that a manager cares about the results, about the people, and about the process. And then keys to motivation, success. You want to enable people, set up people to have successes. Even your worst performer, you can set up a set of situations for them to have small successes and catch them succeeding. Learning, accurate feedback, and praise. So, so there's just some coming attraction. So this is the answers that we got from the folks in LavaCon. So people had a variety. Most of them had some kind of experience with outsourcing. At the start, nobody had a positive impression, and by the end, 4 people had a positive impression. So that was a more involved discussion of a larger group, and you see what they think is going on there. So, I think we're over time, Ryan. You want to? Anyone else have questions, or you want to say anything in closing, Ryan?
Anyone have any questions first? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Barry. I really appreciate it. I apologize for the technical issues in the middle there. I learned a lot. I had honestly never considered solving some of our issues we're having right now with most of our writers transitioning out of traditional technical writing roles. And now I have something to think about now. I really do appreciate it.
Sure.
Yes,
and well, everyone said, I'm happy to continue the conversation with you.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you for attending this webinar. We're going to continue to do some of these. We're going to continue to do webinars and some live in-person meetings whenever we can find a location that is cost-effective for the chapter. But we want to keep the education sessions and the learning continuing throughout the year. So please keep looking at the meetup site and the website, and if you saw this through the MailChimp account, keep checking your email. All right, everybody, thanks a lot. Thank you for coming, and see you next time.